Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Tonight's video is going to be a bit of a special edition. I'm going to talk about what's happening in Australia with these devastating bushfires. We will cover all our usual macro news and a look at all the crypto headlines. But I just want to start by saying, look, thank you to everyone that is donating. All this money is going to the Rural Fire Service. I spoke to them again this morning. They're giving it out to whoever they feel is most in need, the most affected families, whoever needs this money the most. So, look, thank you for your generosity. We've seen so many people donate to all the great causes. A number of celebrities have got behind this. Yesterday, we saw Pink donate $500,000. Just before recording, Nicole Kidman and other celebrities are pledging huge amounts. So, look on social media, the official websites. You can get the link to all the Rural Fire Service, and these fires are across multiple states now. I just want to start off by giving you some shots of what's been happening and some scope about how bad this is. So, look, thoughts are with these Rural Fire Service and the people that are affected and defending their own homes, having to work around the clock. It's like nothing we really have seen before. State of emergency, we've had the biggest evacuation in Australian history take place this week. We've had some more military deployed just recently. I will get into that a little bit more. And for our overseas subscribers, I think people sometimes forget how big Australia is. So here you can see Europe overlaid against Australia and the United States. So we are a country, but we're a massive continent as well. And fires are affecting, obviously, really bad through New South Wales, Victoria, but we've also got fires in Tasmania, South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland. It really is crazy what is happening at the moment. These are some satellite images you can see. We saw photos yesterday where the sun was blacked out in the middle of the day and people were trapped in pitch darkness, people stranded on beaches, trying to breathe. Sometimes words just can't describe what some of these families are going through. I mentioned the size of these fires. Most people were aware of those global headlines last year. The lungs of the earth were burning, when the Amazon rainforest was on fire, and the California fires, we all remember. Well, the Australian fires, this article was from a couple of days ago. So the Australian fires are tenfold bigger than when the Amazon and the California fires took place. We were hearing reports, 500 million animals have been killed. We do love our native animals, and we've got plenty of them. It's just disastrous to see how many of these are in the bush that has been burnt. We're seeing these heartbreaking shots like this. We're seeing animals that are being treated, so all hands on deck trying to help out. And just these hellish like scenes across the country. I can't imagine how these firemen are doing it, physically and mentally, which we did touch on the other day about the post-traumatic stress disorder. So, if you can help someone out, have those conversations, these people are going to be really, changed by these things that are unfolding, as well as all the little ones, as we continue to go through some of these photos. So look, we did interview Greg Mullins the other day. I know some people didn't agree with everything he was saying. I did just want to get him on to share his thoughts, and everyone does have strong opinions on this. So look, we do try and give balanced information. I might have someone on to share other points of view. That's fine. But I guess what really disappoints me about everything that's going on, I definitely think most people agree the government haven't done enough and not soon enough, and it just shows that they're a little bit out of touch with what's happening on the front lines and really with the Australian people, and that's where a lot of this anger is coming from. Putting out an ad like this, very distasteful, I think, and some people are going to disagree with me. That's fine, but we really need our leaders to be doing as much as possible, and I don't understand why there's this hesitation to spend money, particularly when we've got a surplus at the moment. We've got money, we should be spending that, and some of the more preventive measures, I think everyone can agree, could have made things less bad. So other than that, I just wanted to mention that the mainstream media have been jumping on these headlines, and yes, I know some of these sites, Zero Hedge, I do like to use myself, but sometimes these sites do go for the misinformation, the clickbait, whatever you want to call it, and it's been presented by other sites. So this is where they're picking up these headlines from and trying to blame arsonists and lightning and pass the blame. I just don't really think that that's the way we should be looking at this. There's other things we need to be focused on right now. The way that the media is trying to divert attention and create these narratives, I think Australia has really been divided, and at a time when we should all be coming together. How can we help each other? How can we change? How can we prevent this in future? Instead, there's all these these arguments on social media and whatnot. You can see that all these newspapers around the world talking about what's happening in Australia, and yet the Australian talking about the cup coming up and whatnot. I think the media in Australia, some people talk about the US media and, the propaganda machine, but I think a lot of what's happening in Australia, we're starting to see those political interests, corporations, the money, that's all intertwined. And I think that's why more and more people are turning to alternate news sources and getting frustrated with some of the things that are happening in this country. But that's all I'll say on that for the time being. Again, thoughts and prayers with all those affected. We're doing whatever we can to help. I'll try and cover this a little bit more. And I just think now is not the time to be fighting online. Let's try and work together to help as much as we can. Okay, so Hong Kong retail sales are another double-digit decline. We've seen this is what happens when civil unrest unfold. We're getting these big contractions and recession for the economy. Over to China this week, we saw President Xi install financial experts to try and avoid this big gap they've got coming up with all these bonds and all this debt that is coming due at the moment. So we've seen them cut rates, and they've also cut the reserve ratio. So 400 billion, that's how much they've got to try and find before things get nasty. The banks have only got so much reserves. Let's drop the amount of reserves they have. Obviously, that makes them more leveraged, but they're trying to fill this gap. And this is very similar to what's happening in the repo market. In terms of that US-China trade deal, we're seeing that China aggressive expansion where they're buying up things in Australia. They're trying to buy up things in Africa. They need these resources, and they are very aggressive with that expansion, colonization of different continents around the world. But this week, I think the interesting news we got was genetically modified crops. Now, what we do know is that China, particularly when they're feeding their young ones, a lot of what they get from Australia is that organic, particularly baby food, those types of things. So to have genetically modified crops being approved from the US, is this going to upset a lot of people in China? And they've promised to buy these huge amounts of agricultural goods when they've already partnered up with the Australias, the Africas, all these other nations. So are they actually going to buy what they've promised in those trade deals, I think is the question that's being asked. But either way, Trump loves to spin it. It's going to be very large and comprehensive. He's talking about the phase 0 and phase 1 China deal being signed, sealed and delivered on January 15. So let's see if that happens. Either way, I think sentiment towards the US markets is reaching an extreme positive and euphoria, and just about everyone is bullish. We're hearing things like buy stocks no matter what, and that Goldman Sachs is saying the US economy is nearly recession-proof. These are pretty crazy headlines, and when everyone gets too excited, it normally means we are going to have a bit of a correction, at least in the short term. So another bullish headline, party like it's 1998. 3 trillion of the BBB rated bonds may actually be junk. So we've talked about zombie companies, and if interest rates go up at all, these companies can't pay off their debt. If these bonds get downgraded to junk bonds, we know that all the large institutional investors have to sell them. That creates that cascade effect. People are piling into bonds because they think someone else is going to pay more for them in terms of those US Treasury bonds and negative yielding bonds. It's no longer about what the interest rate is paying. So the major banks admitting that QE4 has started. No surprise to you guys. We've been talking about this and the increase in the Fed balance sheet. It's not QE4 according to the Fed, but unfortunately that money is being printed and given out to banks and financial institutions, not to you or I. Now, the other big news this week was what happened here with the assassinations and bombings in Iran. Now, we saw protesters storming the US embassy in Baghdad. Trump blaming Iran for that. We've seen American oil workers exiting the country after the US government's request. We saw the top military commander, Soleimani, sorry, I've probably butchered that there, but after he was assassinated in that US airstrike, gold jumped. We saw Iran come out and saying that they are going to respond. Here are some thoughts on how is this article here, but when you dive a bit deeper and read about what's going on here, it really is crazy. the officials high up in Iran saying we are going to retaliate here. It's never nasty, this talk of war, theories about when your economy's bad, you go to war and spend more money. I know there's so many opinions on what's going on, but just these tensions in the Middle East, and Trump said he didn't want to get involved, he wants to take out troops, and now this happens. It just makes the mind boggle, everything that is happening there. In terms of crypto, we did get reports that Iran was trading at this huge premium because of what happened. But I guess, as always, if you dig a little bit deeper, there's two exchange rates. There's kind of an official exchange rate, but then there's also the real exchange rate in the Iranian economy. So if you actually look at the real exchange rate and do the calculations, there wasn't actually a real premium there. And often when we do see a premium, it just represents how hard it is to get money in or out of these countries. So particularly sanctioned countries, obviously moving money in and out through the banks is kind of what does create a premium for the crypto sometimes as well. So just keep that in mind. One of the countries we are seeing use more and more crypto is Venezuela. After the huge inflation and whatnot. So Burger King there accepting Bitcoin payments in 40 stores. Now, just think about that. That means if you can get your hands on Bitcoin, you can now buy food for your family. So more and more stores are going to pick this up. And, we've heard different figures thrown around, but it's definitely obvious that there are lots of people now using Bitcoin in Venezuela. So with all this happening, we saw gold near 6-year highs. You guys know how bullish I've been on gold for a number of years now. I'm hodling my gold, I'm hodling my silver. It's unfortunate that it's things like this that do take place, but the technical analysts will tell you that gold was setting up after that, that bull flag and the move we had to have its next leg high. So it's funny how the fundamentals and the technicals do tie together sometimes. We've seen Russia come out and possibly announce that they're going to be investing part of their national wealth fund into gold after all these central banks have been hoarding gold. People want safety, and it's pretty obvious when there's the threat of war or something that's really bad happening, that gold and that 5,000 year track record, that is where people are still going to park their money. So despite things like drop gold and some people believing that Bitcoin is far better than gold, as I've always said, gold is still very, very important, particularly to those with a lot of wealth. For those interested, I have got my copy portfolio. That is going to be focused on hard assets, so Bitcoin, the top 5 altcoins by market cap, and gold and silver. So looking to trade the larger movements there, there is a link down below if you follow to our affiliates page to sign up to eToro and use that copy portfolio feature. So it's been a big year for Nuggets News. Plenty of you enjoyed this article and year in review, everything that's been happening on YouTube. So thank you again for your ongoing support. We continue to see new subscribers come in. We've got over 1,000 members signing up for our premium content. You guys now get those fundamentals reports, monthly precious metal updates as gold and silver are becoming more and more important. A daily recap for all of you that are too busy. And as always, we look to reward those that are the best contributors. We've got that weekly digest product as well. So head over to nuggetsnews.com.au for more information on anything we do. I want to throw this one in here. I do love quantum physics, quantum entanglement, and this week we did see that physicists have achieved quantum teleportation between computer chips for the first time. So if your mind boggles when you hear stuff like this, do a bit of research on quantum entanglement and how we can have particles at great distances away from each other in terms of time and space, but actually entangled together. And very, very cool there that we have started seeing quantum teleportation in the real world. Into the crypto news. So the IMF have discussed their role in a central bank digital currency. We're seeing some mixed reports here. So the IMF versus the ECB. ECB have in the past said that they're going to be researching and issuing their own. Now they're saying that the banks need to find better alternatives. So they've obviously been pretty harsh on Libra, whether or not they're going to be doing that themselves, but saying to the banks, look, basically get your act together, find some ways, some systems to bring down payments for everyone. Now, I know the XRP community is saying that this is a no-brainer that they're going to adopt XRP. I'm not sure if they're going to do that or adopt their own ledgers, but either way, it's just showing you that blockchain, these distributed ledgers, are far more efficient than the current banking system. Former Barclays exec to launch UK's first regulated crypto bank. So everyone knows about the issues, the friction between the banking world and the crypto world. First regulated bank in the UK is going to be an absolute positive Q1 this year, so very, very soon. HODL, you can spend all your different coins any way you want them. Very, very cool for our UK subscribers. We saw Carnegie Mellon announce that they're investing $4 million into developing and researching DeFi. So people saying that Ethereum's dead, whatnot. I just can't see how you can take that angle. There was a great thread by Anthony Sass last week showing the 50-part tweet thread, I think, hundreds of things that are happening and being developed on Ethereum. Now, I know that Bitcoin doesn't always have that much development, and that is some way a positive for Bitcoin, but there is just that much happening in terms of development on Ethereum. These mainstream companies adopting it, universities pledging research. How can anyone think that this is dead? An article this week from Congress, I did touch on this previously, but basically trying to keep big tech out of finance. So once we've had Libra come out, now we're seeing Apple Card and whatnot. The banks are obviously trying to defend their territory, even central banks. This is encroaching on everything that they do. So trying to create some new rules and laws around keeping the big tech companies that have already got so much power out of the financial world. Now, obviously, the only people that can fight big tech, the banks are big tech because of how much money that those companies have. So this is going to be a real, lawyer off. I'm sure this is going to drag on for ages. But either way, it's such a big battleground because of how much money you make from getting into the financial world. Now, speaking of all that money, this was an interesting tweet that I really loved. 68.4 trillion set to be inherited from baby boomers over the next 25 years. So we talk about aging populations and how all that wealth is going to be handed down to millennials. Millennials love things like cryptocurrency. A lot of that money is going to flow into those types of assets. They're less interested in things like, shares or gold or bonds. But the other argument here is that with the lack of funding, with all these pensions and government debts, a lot of these boomers aren't going to be passing on any inheritance. They're going to be drawing down all those assets that they have accumulated over their lifetime. There's been some really interesting talks about this as well. So probably a video that I'll do again in future, a whiteboard session to talk about how this all works. But I don't think that boomers are going to just live out their lives, get their nice paychecks from government and just pass on all their assets. I actually think it's going to play out very, very differently to that now that governments and pension funds are running out of money. Telegram have refused to tell the SEC how they spent that $1.7 billion from their ICO. So this was one that I, again, encourage people to avoid. When you start off with a market cap of nearly $2 billion as a tech startup, how is that a good investment? How are you meant to get that 10-bag, 100-bag return when there's so much competition out there? This was just another copycat Me Too. They don't have that many customers and businesses that are pledging and dying to use their token and platform. So very interesting how this one gets taken further. Battle between the Telegram and SEC is going to be ongoing. Now, last week we did see that IOTA had a few issues. They have patched that bug, got the network back up in less than 24 hours. Disappointing that we are still ironing out bugs on mainnet this far in, but either way, everything back to normal on IOTA. In terms of Ethereum, we saw that Virgil Griffith was arrested for going over to a sanctioned country, North Korea, but he has got out now on bail. I believe that bail was set at around $100,000 or $1 million, sorry. But great to see that Virgil is out, and I have met him and interviewed him in person. We also saw MetaMask taken down off the Google Play Store, but that has been reinstated this week, so that's great to see. But don't forget the importance of learning how to use these decentralized apps and not relying on third parties like the Google Store. Ethereum have successfully hard forked the second part of that upgrade to delay the ice age there. So the block time has been reduced for about 25%. The Ethereum network should now be chugging along even better, even faster, more efficient if you have had to use it recently. Now, back over to China, where we are seeing stories of Bitcoin miners being told to scale down because of the electricity shortfall. So obviously there's this abundance of energy in China over that wet season when all those hydro dams have just got spare capacity. Now that's all over, we are going to see a bit of that pullback. But despite that, we are seeing Bitcoin hash rate still near record highs. Now, as we approach the halving, we're seeing that Bitmain have actually laid off half their staff. So this just shows you that they have to cut costs. I think it's all systems go, make as much money as you can, cut expenses up to the halving to try and smooth out that process. Because at that point in time, in theory, on paper, your profits are going to halve. We did have Proof of Keys Day 2 days ago. This didn't get as much attention as it has in the past. Not your keys, not your coins. Hopefully by now, most of you have got your crypto on a hardware wallet, nice and safely stored. If you don't know how to do that, use a custodian with insurance. There's some good ones out there. We are going to be doing some more work with some of those better companies, even within Australia, that do offer insurance on your crypto now. Unfortunately, YouTube is back in the news this week, and we've seen a number of YouTubers actually get hacked, and people are using their channels for crypto scams. So a lot of people, I guess, talk the talk but don't walk the walk. You know, we've got so many layers of security at Nuggets News because it is just a fact that you are targeted and people want your passwords and whatnot. So there's a number of scams going around at the moment. We're seeing live streams being taken advantage of with fake names and tiles and replaying old streams, trying to get people to contribute. But now we're actually seeing YouTubers themselves get hacked and their channels being taken over. So into the technical analysis, this week's is brought to you by our partners, New Brighton Capital. Plenty of you know the great services they offer. They've got a free consultation if you are interested in setting up your self-managed super fund. You can use that in conjunction with any of the exchanges you are registered with in Australia. Most of them are familiar with self-managed super funds now. You can get your gold and silver in there. I believe you can even use eToro and copy portfolio features if you're interested in mirroring those hard asset portfolios or copying any of the traders on eToro as well. So a couple of weeks ago, the 17th of December, we were talking about this Adam and Eve pattern, and not a lot of people were talking about this at the time. It gets a bit quiet over Christmas, but this was the pattern that I was hoping we'd see play out with a bit of a double bottom. And more recently this week, as we got that pattern start to play out here, we were looking for a final little pullback into the golden pocket, as you can see here on the Fibonacci retracements. And this actually played out pretty perfectly. Almost to the dollar, we can see it tapping that golden zone. And so I know plenty of our members caught that one, a decent trade. If we go back out to the daily chart, we are just waiting to see if we can now break the neckline of this Adam and Eve pattern, because we have got that nice double bottom that looks to be forming and a pretty decent volume profile here. So if I just remove that for a second, let's bring up our Bollinger Bands. I found that these have been working really well again compared to the moving averages of late. But if we have a look at that daily chart, each time we've got outside, we have had a bit of a correction all the way back to the top. So I think we are seeing some signs that we might finally start to get that uptrend that we've been looking for. So I've got some trend lines drawn on here. I just want to show you the cycle brackets. So tomorrow is that day where we can really start that push up, and that could be, along with these trend lines and the price action we've seen, enough to get us through here. So look, maybe we do touch it. Let's bring that back on auto. Maybe we do touch it, we touch this trend line, we have a couple of days, form another bull flag, and finally, we can break this long-term downtrend that we've been in ever since that big run-up from 3K all the way to 14K, which we knew at the time was going to need some correction. But again, I didn't think we'd go down this deep for this long. I'm just going to show you Bitcoin dominance quickly. That does look like it wants to continue higher as well, and more importantly, some of the altcoins, they're all waiting on someone to take the lead, whether that's Ethereum, XRP. There's been a few mid-cap coins perform really well. But again, if you have a look at the daily chart, we are getting to some very, very interesting points where we can be breaking these long-term downtrends. And that ETH BTC pair may be looking to put in that Adam and Eve double bottom where we get a bit of a V shape and then a more rounded bottom and start to head higher. So some positive signs out there, guys. In terms of those bushfires, again, do anything you can to help those, even if it's just a conversation if you can't help financially. I've said the mental health side of this is really important as well. There's plenty of places you can make donations. I'm also doing a live stream with Ivan on Tech on his channel tonight. We're going to try and raise some funds there as well. But for more information on anything we do, head over to nuggetsnews.com.au. Look after yourselves, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share these videos around, and we'll talk again soon. Cheers.